All right, welcome to this week's episode of Old Gold. Today we've got my esteemed colleague, the head of our investor relations, Max Beck, and a special guest that Max and I know well, Harry Anagnostaris Adams. I hope I didn't chop that up too bad, Harry. But Harry heads up the Tulu Kapi project and KEFI, and Max and I were out there in Ethiopia. So we've got a lot in store for you today, and Harry's even got his own special guest that we're going to bring on in a little bit later in the episode. So, all right, well, here we go. As mentioned, Harry, Max and I were out there in February. So if you could maybe give us a little bit of info on the progress of how things are going out there in Western Ethiopia.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me on and supporting the company through what you guys do. I do remember you were a bit taken aback on the day. I don't think you quite expected the big show that was on, but
it was we got the red carpet for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think you quite expected what you saw in Addis Ababa either. I don't think you expected giant high rises and a modern city. Ethiopia is a bit of a surprise to most people. Yeah, so I mean, the importance of that day, I suppose, has been reflected in what's happened since that day. And what I mean by that is that, Ethiopia is the only country in Africa that's never been colonised. And it was the world's last empire also. So why do I say that? Because what I'm saying is that the culture, the society is quite tight. Tight as a nation, as a proud nation. 80 tribes, 80 languages or dialects, but a nation. And that's why all the minerals are still there, because there was no king of Belgium or of England exploiting it over the last few hundred years. That's a pretty, profoundly important penny to drop. The second profoundly important penny to drop is that the landmass was joined at the hip 170, 200 million years ago or whatever to the landmass that yields most of the gold in Western Australia. So it's the same rocks. But in Western Australia, over the last 50 years, it's become the number 2 gold producer in the world as a region. And here, when I arrived, there was one gold mine. The third penny to drop is that it's been a challenge, a hard road, and we had to be very devoted and tenacious to convince. All this is wonderful, isn't it, with hindsight, but I can now look with hindsight on the journey we've been through and say that it was a challenge to actually open up that nation to a bunch of guys from Australia and elsewhere. Fortunately, the project was in trouble and we were invited in to fix it, so people did let us come in. And then, fortunately, we invited the government to be a shareholder, and they accepted that invitation. And now I'll come back to your question. At that ceremony, effectively, the head of the country sort of gave his approval. He gave his blessing and said, we all have to push forward and get behind these people and make it happen. And let's make it happen, sort of thing. Now, with that background of what I just went through, it puts it into context, why it's so important. And what you see on the ground ever since then is a lot of activity. I'm sure everyone wants to see bulldozers and engineers fabricating plant and so on, but it's also the case that the first 6 months out there is mainly moving people. That's why it's got a 27-month development schedule. If it was in Kalgoorlie, it would be probably a 17-month development schedule. And a good chunk of that is because you have to move people first before you start bulldozing on the site of development. And so it's been, it's a veritable flurry. I'm here this week, these weeks in Addis with the COO, sort of digging in, so to speak, assignment by assignment, progress by progress, line by line, and making sure it's all happening. But yes, it's all on schedule. Yes, it's all happening. I can't proudly show you a half-built plant, but we only had the groundbreaking in the middle of February, right? But it's all happening, and the diesel was a bit of a worry, right? Around the world, not just here, for obvious reasons. Cutting off world supply the way it has been has wreaked havoc in this country as well as elsewhere. But fortunately, we've not run out, and we've promised supply, and so that's all okay. But it's a daily management job. We know that there's a set of railway lines. We're running down that railway line. We know we've started. We know where it ends. We know when it ends, and we're barreling down that railway line.
Sounds good. Harry, I was picking up that first production is in 2008, and I wondered whether that was correct or whether it's still the back end of 2007. Sorry, 28 and 27, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah,
lost a decade.
Yeah,
I wish.
Yeah, I wish. The contractual schedule is commissioning starts at the end of 27 and full production in the middle of 28. That's the schedule. So it's as a ramp-up process as we work through all the different commissioning stages.
Max, is there anything that you would like to throw on the table?
No, I was actually really intrigued. You're very focused on the build, and Eric and I were lucky enough to sit through a number of presentations on the way that you're putting this whole thing together, and it seemed to me almost like a textbook case of how to do things properly, particularly when the government is involved and all the rest of it. But let's fast forward then to full production. Do you have at the back end of that a geology strategy to further increase, or is that going to be carrying on through the production?
In broad terms, you've got two teams for development and production, in broad terms. One is a bunch of international managers who've done it before in other places, and contractors underneath them who've done it before in other places. And they bring an abundance of technical, operational, execution experience to the country. Secondly, you've got a bunch of local managers and local personnel. And those people bring Ethiopia to the equation. How would I put it? This is a vanilla gold plant, a vanilla open pit, designed by people who've built and operated many sites of this character in other countries. So the only complexity, to the layperson it's all highly complex, but to the person who's built them before and operated them before, it's what they do. And they're all very driven people, very motivated people, honourable people, and we all know how to whip each other into shape very easily. We've done it before. But the only thing that's complicated is that the country's new to the industry. So the whole suite of our personnel and systems that gets brought to bear to make it happen here is focused on the idiosyncrasies of operating in Ethiopia. The clearing of the Toyota Land Cruiser fleet off the Djibouti port, the access to the tanker in Djibouti port to get the diesel loaded up into a 50,000 litre tanker, to get it delivered to Gimbi, all these idiosyncrasies that are specific to Ethiopia are where you're building a culture and building an organisation. But insofar as having the skills to implement, we just bring them with us. We imported them. But it's the Ethiopian elements that are the key. And that's why we invited the government to be our shareholder at the beginning. That's why I've personally spent 90% of my last 10 years in this country, or at least 50% in this country, and the other 40% that I wasn't with family, moving around the business world to support this country. And the reason I do that is because we're crafting relationships, we're crafting confidence, we're crafting self-confidence within Ethiopia to do it, for the modern industry. And so it takes time, it's hand-holding, it's relationship building. You don't do it over the phone or whatever. You do it by being on the ground and working together and working through issues together and making it happen together. You were at that opening ceremony and you saw the Prime Minister. I'm sure you saw him standing there chatting and laughing, and then he turned quite sharply on our construction manager, looked him in the eye and said, "How long does it take to build those particular houses?" I don't know if you noticed that bit of the conversation. And the guy said, "Oh, those houses are 5 months." He said, "No, that's too long, 3 months." You see? So to me, that's what Ethiopian relationships are about, is to make it happen good and fast with everybody's commitment.
You gave some hint at the beginning about how surprised we were, perhaps, at the scale of what's going on in Ethiopia. Perhaps for people watching, you could give us some sense of that, because it really is quite impressive, particularly what they're planning with the airport and then what that's going to mean for Addis Ababa. And of course, further on, the multiplier effect throughout the country. It's quite something.
The power of the country is reflected in that history I was alluding to about never having been conquered. There's a character core inside the peoples. Has to be. How can it be the only one of 54? But that's the case. There's something deep, strong, character, fibre. It has just decided to turn on the private sector. It was government-to-government dealings by and large until the opening up of democratic reform in 2018 and the introduction of the IMF development package a couple of years ago. I've forgotten exactly when. The currency's been floated, the banking system's being opened. It's game on for the private sector now. It stopped being an empire in 74, stopped being communist controlled in 91. It stopped being single party ruled by a minority ethnic group in 2018. It started government to government dealings quite strongly immediately, and now it's turned on the private sector. And when it does turn on a particular mission, it has sometimes worked very well. The airline is now far and away the number one airline of the African continent. Ethiopia is the number one hub, Addis Ababa, the number one hub for the African continent. And they're building, I'm not sure, Max, if it's $8 billion or $10 billion airport, another airport in Addis Ababa, about 40 minutes drive away down the motorway at a slightly lower altitude, because it's been calculated that from that altitude you can fill a bit more fuel into the belly of the plane and take it direct to New York once, no stop. That's been calculated to make it long haul most efficient for the country. And they've ordered 100 and something new planes, and their fleet is all new anyway. So the same thing happened with energy generation. The largest hydro scheme in Africa has been commissioned and launched. Flowers that didn't exist here not that long ago. All of a sudden it's the number 2 exporter in the world, with bellyfuls of flowers going up to the Netherlands every day. And actually gold is now a turn on, so to speak. The penny's dropped. With the gold price taking off, the penny's dropped. It's already the number 1 exporter. And all we've got is artisanal and one industrial mine. That's all we've got at the moment. It's the number 1 exporter. Imagine when there are a number of Tulu Kapis. Imagine when it goes the way of Kalgoorlie over the next 20 years. Imagine what it'll be like. So this is, to convey it to you, the country has to do it. 130 million people, there's a lot of kids coming out of grad school with degrees and hunger and ambition. The country has to do it. But it is doing it. And we just happen to be part of the launch of, one of the sectors that can make a big contribution.
We witnessed it, but we also, I had a conversation with you about when we were sitting at dinner one night, Harry, about just kind of the boom that's happening. As you said, we were a bit surprised about the progress of the city. It's not, it was kind of beyond our expectations. The people were amazing, but they're really going through a boom right now in Ethiopia. And it was really cool to be able to not just hear about it, but to see it with our own eyes.
Yeah, well, also I'd imagine, because I was surprised, I'd imagine you were surprised by how cosmopolitan the city is. And it's because it's the base for the African Union. It's sort of the Brussels of Africa. There's over 100 embassies. Every media group in the world has got a base here. Every NGO has got a base here. So you're talking about a pretty cosmopolitan city. And it was built with big ideas in mind. It's like when you visit Sydney in Australia. It was built by convicts originally. So all these little narrow roads in the middle of the city, right? They didn't think like empire builders. They thought like convicts who were being made to build a road. You go to Melbourne. Melbourne was built with the riches of the gold rushes in Australia. Yeah, you go there and you see the wide boulevards and big, wonderful buildings. It was built with pride, with wealth. Well, Ethiopia, Addis Ababa is like that too. It's being built with, has been and is being built with pride and wealth, and not with a simple mind, but with a huge vision, sort of thing.
I'm going to switch it up a little bit here. We're interested when we get people on this channel for their sort of broader view of what's going on in the gold market, and you're exceptionally well positioned to take in all that's going on around us. So I've got a two-part question. First of all, do you have a view on the 4 billion takeover of Allied Gold? And the second part to the question is, where do you see the gold price going towards the end of the year?
On the first part, I was surprised by the takeover. Well, I see some extremely good corporate entrepreneurs in the form of Allied Gold having put together a group of assets in rapid pace in West Africa and East Africa. Probably seeing value. I'm making this up, it's just my interpretation. I can't speak with any insight or authority. But probably seeing their valuations jump way ahead of where they might have expected when they started this mission a few years ago, because the gold market taking off. And I can only surmise they're all smart people. They sat down with their risk-return slide rules and accepted an offer which they felt was a good risk-return balance. And I heard on the grapevine the other day they're already back in cooking with another deal. So these guys, they're unstoppable machine sort of thing. But I'd like to venture into making two comments from our point of view, without in any way judging other people's points of view. That is that it's good that they got cracking here on development, because it would have been challenging enough for us, and even more challenging if they hadn't been around, because on the street of the gold industry, we talk all the time, and the operators can compare notes and all sorts of things that are being done by both teams every day. And so we're learning and pleased that they went ahead of us on some things that are doing quicker, and therefore paving the way. That was useful for us on a number of things on the ground. Being second is sometimes better than being first on certain jobs. So they helped us in that respect by just knocking their site into shape quickly. They didn't have a community to move. They were able to get cracking quicker. Secondly, their takeout by Zijin, a global powerhouse in gold, is good to my mind because it brings long-term commitment to the country, not, what can we sell it for next week type of thinking, but long-term industrial commitment, which is what we're doing. We're building for the long term a platform which will extend way beyond Tulu Kapi over time. It'll take time, but it goes way beyond Tulu Kapi. And Zijin reinforces that long-term commitment of the industry. The government needs to see that. The government needs to see long-term commitment. So that's a good thing. Secondly, with the proud of an Aussie gold mining guy, I venture to say, we have made more discoveries from our starting point in this company than I'm aware of any Chinese company making outside China in the last 20 years. Well, all of them put together have made less discoveries outside China than we have. So they don't present any competition for us on the exploration side. And yet they provide long-term stability to the industry in this country. So to us, it's a win-win, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Very good. We, of course, Tulu Kapi and KEFI is a key component of the Chancery royalty stable, and we're delighted to have you within that. I wonder if you could just maybe give a little bit of an overview of your relationship with, obviously, Jeremy and the Chancery royalty team, and some sense of how you found working with us over the last sort of 4 or 6 months. Is it something like that?
You want a reference check?
Putting myself up to be shot down, I think, Harry.
On camera at the same time. Crikey.
I know, really.
Yeah.
Puts us on the spot.
We can edit this.
Well, how would I put it? I wasn't aware of Chancery, to be honest, when I was contacted. What I was aware of was what I was doing and what our agenda was. We had our debt all, pinned down, and we had a whole portfolio of offers from the equity side that we were pinning down, and we had a royalty offer on the table from an established royalty company that was in lawyers' hands, and Chancery came along, and Jeremy tried to do his number on me, right, pushing and shoving me around like he does everybody, and I said, Jeremy, we've only just met, but. I have to say, if you're asking me to sort of reactions and feelings, it was clear to me that he was a straight-up guy who comes from the same sort of school of values that I come from. I was a banker initially, and I devoted my life to the mining sector. And, if you ask me to say to which top 10 people in the world would I bequeath the health and future of my family, most of them would be mining people. And you get some mining people who are real salt of the earth, genuine, high integrity people. We all look after each other, whether it's safety, security, performance. We shake out bullshit artists quite fast. The stock market doesn't, because it likes to follow a bullshit artist up, sell out and move on to the next bullshit artist sometimes. Jeremy clearly comes from a school of upbringing that was familiar to me. And so we talked very directly, very quickly, came to a deal very quickly. I said, you got no time, Jeremy, you either deal at the same terms, it can be no 3,000 questions. You read all the material, you either deal or you don't, because that's the position that I had to be in. I had to hurry it all on. And to his credit, you guys didn't muck around. He was also quick enough, I would imagine he would be here and he'd be saying, I know the people that have signed off on all your stuff, and I don't need to read their stuff because I know who they are. I'd imagine you would. You don't have to reread Lycopodium's detailed engineering because they've done it over 100 times just in Africa, and so on. So he knows enough, and your team knows enough not to waste time, and has the authority delegated to make decisions. Most companies aren't like that, and so that was refreshing. So that was the good news. I haven't had any bad news yet, so ring me up when there's some bad news, and I'll talk to you about it.
So Harry, Max asked you a bit earlier about where you think the gold price is going by year end, and I personally don't really like to make a hardcore sort of pinpoint prediction, but sometimes Jeremy pushes me to make one, and we have conversations about it. And I guess the consensus, I guess we could say it's a Chancery consensus, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 by year end, which would be good for all of us, obviously. But what's your take on that?
I'm disappointed. I thought you might have forgotten to ask me that one. I'll come at it differently. As a company fiduciary on behalf of shareholders. I'll answer your question in a minute. But as a company fiduciary, it's sort of irrelevant. Why do I say that? Because it's all about feet on the ground and head in the clouds. Feet on the ground is how do you service all your debt and all your fixed commitments and all your taxes and all your whatever, all your commitments, at which gold price? And here it comes out to somewhere near to $1,400 an ounce. So that's the sleep at night, feet on the ground type of thinking. Do I think gold will ever sit below $1,400 again? No. Do I think gold will have the occasional drop? Yes. Why? Because that's its job. Its job is to provide liquidity when the world panics. When the world panics and people have to rush to the door for liquidity, whether they've got margin calls or another GFC or whatever the hell it is, gold will drop. But she'll be the first to recover out of the whole lot of them. Will it happen again? Absolutely. The world is full of dumbasses, and after 7 years they've all forgotten the last drop, right? And but the $1,400 number is a critical number to sleep at night. Okay, so how much money do we make at gold prices above that? And we've published different numbers and so on. So then you say head in the clouds. What do you reckon, Harry, about the upside here? Well, I think there's two levels of upside. One is the fact that we're a first mover. Even though there was a gold mine when we came here, they'd be the first to tell you they've never gone to other countries and made discoveries. So they haven't done that. They haven't developed that skill. And then there was Allied Gold kicking off Kurmuk. Well, they've sold out before they even started the thing, so they haven't developed a finesse for discovery. So the first bit of upside here is that we're actually in a wonderful position to be at the front line of discovery in turning on another Kalgoorlie, so to speak. That's a huge upside, whether the gold price is $3,000, $4,000, $8,000, or whatever it is. It's huge upside, huge leverage. And the second bit of upside here is the gold price itself. Now, getting to your question, I think it's in a whole new world, because most of my working life, all the economics graduates and all the young central bankers were spewing out all this rhetoric about gold being a dinosaur. You don't hear any of that anymore, do you? So, they're all coming out now talking about, with the collapse of the US dollar, the new Fort Knoxes throughout the world, so that the world doesn't have to rely on the US. And that's the rhetoric of the day. And it's barely started. It's barely started, that rhetoric. And so I think that gold price is completely disconnected to the cost of production. Average all-in sustaining cost today is somewhere around $1,600, $1,700 globally. But does the world want the gold industry to turn off production? No. Has that possibility of going down to those levels and staying there ended? Yes. Will the competitors for the US for currency supremacy over the next 50 years only escalate? Yes. Will some of the solutions be gold-backed? Yes. Where does that take gold? Well, we only publish numbers in the range 3,000 to 5,000 to give people a feel for the leverage, because 5,000 gives you double the NPV of 3,000 on Tulu Kapi. That's the important point we're trying to make. Take it up to 7, 8, 9, 10, or whatever numbers can float around, and you're just off the scale. So personally, I can't see gold living below $3,000 for any length of time. And I think that the upside on gold is now sort of stratospheric because it's actually returned to its roots and to its real purpose in life of providing security when you can't trust the paper. That's what I think has happened. And frankly, whether you want to bet on 6,000 or 7,000 or 8,000 doesn't matter to me. The upside is huge. The multiples on KEFI are so high it doesn't matter. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I like that answer. Because at the moment, it looks like we're kind of basing around the 4,500 level. It looks like that may be the jumping off point for the next leg up. But you're right. The end game is anybody's guess. But regardless of whether it's at 7, 8, 10, 15,000 an ounce, it doesn't matter because it's all good news for us. So. Yeah. So now for the $1 million question, Harry. What are you and Jeff cooking up?
Before I hand you over to Jeff, let me introduce the man properly. He didn't know he'd be on this thing until an hour or two ago. Going back to my working life in Australia, up till 20 years ago, I experienced this sort of episode for the gold sector, but nothing quite so profound as what's happening now. It was more like gold booms and bubbles and things. And, I was very fortunate. I worked with an excellent team for excellent people, the oldest mining family office in the country. They founded BHP. So I was part of that group that managed that old mining money in Australia, and we grew up with Kalgoorlie going from one mine to a powerhouse. That was my upbringing. And we grew up with Australia opening the banking system from 4 banks to many banks, and the currency floating, and all these things happened in my career in Australia. And but we always heard about this part of the world, and so when I 20 years ago put together a team, we moved a handful of people, key doers with track records and their families to Cyprus. We set up a little team, including some Cypriot people, but all these international other people as well. And in the first 10 years, we put our foot on a lot of stuff, and we made some discoveries, more than we ever could have imagined in Australia. And the discoveries were 90% due to Jeff Rayner. And when we decided to spin off our exploration in frontier markets, because we'd kicked off a huge copper project in Spain, which is now, I think, £2 billion. I've lost track. Market cap. It's called Atalaya. We launched all that. We put that together. It had no resources reserves when we turned up. It was a complete bloody dog's breakfast, a mess. And we sorted that out and launched it. And we followed particular geological terrains. It was the geology that led us. And it wasn't me driving the geology interpretation, I can guarantee you. It was Jeff. And then we had amassed this portfolio of discoveries in other places as well, like Saudi Arabia. We made discoveries. That was Jeff. So he was the leader of those discoveries. Amazing, really. Not to give him a big head, it was easy because people with the experience from Australia could see things that perhaps others couldn't quite see. But on the other hand, the dedication and the drive and the energy and the insight and the visualization due credit has to go to Jeff and the team that worked with him. But about 10 years ago, we got boring for Jeff because it was all about engineering and finance and government and security and all that stuff that a discoverer doesn't want to hear about. He doesn't want to know about. He wants to just discover another one. And Jeff went off. He worked for Robert Friedland's group, Gina Reinhardt's group, world-class, world-scale organisations, known for their huge contributions in mining, discoveries, all that stuff. And then he came back to KEFI just now. He started last Monday?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. I've lost track.
Week and a half.
Week and a half. Okay. And we've been beating the shit out of each other every day as we sat down together, basically, setting our sights and cooking up mayhem. I say that with all the best respect. And so that's what he's doing here. Now, if you want him to explain it in his words, I'll hand you over to him now. But in my words, it's time for KEFI to start taking advantage of its leadership position, the platform it's created. We're not going to run amok. We're just not like that. But we're going to actually put our foot on some things that can create as much upside and value to Chase as we already have in Tulu Kapi. And that's why Jeff's here now. I'll hand you over and let him express it in his own words.
Yeah, good. I'm happy to be back with KEFI. And whilst you guys are talking, I was thinking, there was a life before Harry, so there's BH, and there's a life after Harry, which is AH. So I've been working for a bit over 40 years, and I've known Harry for 20, and about 11 of those working for EMED, his first company in Europe. And we floated KEFI in late 2006. Prior to that, I was working for majors in Australia, BHP Gold and Newcrest Mining. And I entered the world of juniors in Italy, in Sardinia. We built a gold mine, brand new gold mine, new discovery, heavy thermal gold in Sardinia. Really terrible place to work, I can tell you. And so we built an operation there, trained up the locals. We also made 2 other discoveries on the island. One of them still sitting there, just under 1 million ounces. Another one stuck in a military zone, right on the edge of it, or inside of it. And that could be a couple of million ounces easily. We never got the chance to drill it out. So I've been working in Europe since 1998, basically. And it's important to have the background of the majors because they train you up. They used to, but it doesn't happen anymore. And they invest in their staff. And with the juniors, there's a different passion, different hunger, and there's not all that bureaucracy in front of you. You're allowed to you can act quickly, you can get things done quickly without paperwork and a whole line-up managers. So I worked until a Canadian group took over gold mines in Sardinia, and I joined Harry with EMED, Rio Tinto. And Harry was in Cyprus, just looking for volcanic massive sulfides, and I'm going to continue that work shortly. And concurrently, we made a discovery in Slovakia. It was called Bielý vrch. It was a brand new discovery. There was just a couple of bits of rock that big that were uprooted by a tree that had fallen over. And we sampled and got a couple of grams out of it. And the first drill hole we drilled, I had the lowest budget ever in my whole life, to tell you the truth, 300,000 euros for 1 year. So the first hole, from top to bottom, was 130 metres at 1.3 grams. That was our first drill hole in Slovakia. We've got a JORC resource on that, over 1 million ounces, open cut. It's probably 3 or 4 times more than that. Just hasn't been drilled at depth. and that's the problem of trying to build a new gold mine in a place like Slovakia. So it's just sitting there. From there on, Rio Tinto, about, and Atalaya, it's worth £2 billion now, market cap. We floated KEFI, and we started off in Turkey. It was very hard work in Turkey. The ground's very, very tightly held, and the license is very small. But we were successful. We made a new discovery, which we sold to, it was an epithermal vein. We sold that to the Overchik mine. We managed to get Centerra, the Canadian company, to joint venture us on 2 properties in Turkey. And subsequently, Centerra made a big discovery in the north of Turkey a few years later, a porphyry copper. In 2008, I think it was, we got interested in Saudi Arabia because Saudi had just opened up its doors to foreign investment for gold. Previously, that was all the realm of the country, of the state. So we moved into Saudi. It was hard work because Ma'aden, the principally state-owned company, held the lion's share of the ground. They just had a big rectangle in the middle of the country. It was all theirs. And so we were lucky. We managed to make some discoveries really, really quickly. And 2 of them are now under PFS and DFS, Hawaii and Jibal Qutman. Hawaii is over 30 million tonnes. It's a volcanic massive sulfide with copper, gold and zinc. And that's still being drilled out and with a pre-feasibility study on it. Jibal Qutman will be brought into production, I believe, late this year. And that's a gold mine. Both of those places were outcropping, but no one had drilled it. The United States Geological Survey drilled 2 holes into Jibal Qutman and left it. And we made a brand new discovery, and there's over close to 1 million ounces there right now in Jibal Qutman. At Hawaii, the French Geological Survey had identified 34 VMSs in the Wadi Bida belt, and they didn't drill Hawaii. They thought it wasn't good enough. And we did, and look what's happened. And we found other satellite deposits around Hawaii. There's El Godia, El Jafur, and the Mamala Gold. So they'll all be brought in as satellite mines to Hawaii. And in addition, there's 15 other licenses which the joint venture company GEMCO has in Saudi Arabia. So there's more to find. In each one of those 15 licenses, there are old workings. Some of them have never even been trenched nor drilled. But you can go in there, you can see the mineralisation, you can get grams per tonne gold. We're not talking about going to do stream sediment surveys or soil samplings. We've got to walk up drill target straight away. And from our experiences in Saudi, we recognised that there was association of sodium with gold with these particular granites, and that led us to Tulu Kapi. And having a mining background, so I've been both a mine geologist and exploration geologist, we had a look at their feasibility study and realised that they had overcosted it because they had chosen to bulk mine it and diluted the gold grade down to below 2 grams. And we realised that we could selectively mine that because it was structurally controlled and it was visible. The gold is in the white bit and the waste is in the green bit. So you can mine right up to it when you drill and blast. So that means you can have a combination of selective mining, which means you raise the gold grade, and now the gold grade is about 0.5 higher, something like that, after diluted. So that's how we acquired that, through recognising how to mine a deposit, and then from knowing how to mine it, that's how you do your resource. It's not the other way around. So and that was our good fortune to get into Tulu Kapi, because the other company that had it, basically they over-relied on consultants and didn't have that flexibility to change, especially when the gold price dropped overnight. The day they put in, the month they put in their DFS to the government here, gold price crashed $400. So they were left high and dry. So we've made a lot of discoveries of small groups. I like working with good people in small groups. It's good fun working with people that are enthusiastic, and you can reach out to them very quickly, and that's the advantage of working with Harry. And if I find something that I'm interested in, pick up the phone, he says, yep, go for it. And you know, when you're working for a Newcrest or a BHP, that doesn't happen like that. And basically I'll wait for someone to die before you get promoted. It's true. It's true, that's why I left.
That doesn't happen around here, by the way.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that Harry lives quite a long time. So I'm happy to be back. And I like the energy with the small caps, the juniors, but I don't think we'll be there for very long. When you ask what we're cooking up, well, there's a lot of opportunity here in Ethiopia, a lot of inexperience, you would say, a lot of artisanal miners collecting gold from active streams, from paleo streams, which are now 10 metres, 30 metres above the river gravels. It's the Arabian-Nubian, part of the Arabian-Nubian Shield. In Saudi, you know, it was explored for 30 years by governments, the geological surveys of the United States and France. And similarly, here, the United Nations was active in the 70s, and then nothing because of the politics in the country. So prior to that were the Italians, just before the Second World War, for 7 or 8 years. Then this period in the 70s by the United Nations, and then nothing. So there's big opportunities here, and we hope to make the most of it. We're looking at a number of opportunities right now. I'm pretty excited about them, and we'll get into it pretty quickly. You know, the straight up drill targets. So very easy to fast track discovery and then to get to a resource. And, you know, to a scoping study, that's all exciting, and I like that part of exploration. But the mining background has been really valuable to be able to understand what is economic, what does an ore body look like, how are you going to mine it, and then how do you do the resource, what are all the costs, and, you know, working out the NPVs of it. You know, working for big companies, you know, they're not looking at anything less than 2, 3, 4 billion in PV, and well, something like 1 or 2 here is very, very significant.
We look forward to the news coming out of Ethiopia. I know you've only been there a week and a half, but I'm sure Harry will give you another week and a half to get some results in for the company. We look forward to hearing that very quickly.
I was here from 2012 to 16 in Ethiopia, so there's a lot of information that I retain. And as Harry said, the country's come ahead in both in its development in the cities and the mines department. You know, for the first time I've been onto their cadastral report today, and it's a real pleasure to be able to open up a cadastral map, tenement map, click on it, and, you know, that's all happened in just the last couple of years. So it's making exploration a lot easier and identify opportunities.
Yeah, well, Ethiopia is definitely on a road to crazy levels of progress, as Max and I saw when we were there in February. So thanks for coming on, Jeff. We really appreciate your input, and you know, we wish, of course, the best of success for everybody there, because it means a lot to. We're very proud at Chancery to have that royalty with Tulu Kapi. So I want to thank. I know Harry's off the screen, but I want to thank Harry as well. For coming on and spending some time. I know that you guys are both busy, so I really appreciate your time. And it was really good to hear a bit of update from you guys. And I'm sure that the investors and the viewers on this channel really appreciate that as well. So is there anything to add before we wrap things up?
Not really. I think this industry is built on discipline and integrity and flair. And I try my best, and blessed with a very strong team of people. If anyone ever gets the impression that this is a one-person company, they just don't understand. Most of the people are way, way too busy, and their focus way, way too specialised to be distracted by this conversation. They have their job to do. But I think that if there's anything I'm proud of, it was summarised by a chap I bumped into at a conference last year, I think. And I was just sitting at the table grabbing a bite to eat at lunchtime in this conference, and a young guy, well, young compared to me, yelled out from the other side of the table and said, hi, Harry. And I said, yeah, hi. And he said, I'm so-and-so. Don't know if you remember me. I said, I'm sorry. Where do we know each other from? And he said, 30 years ago, you employed me straight out of university, and I was working under so-and-so down the such and such decline, and I just wanted to thank you. And I said, what for? And he said, I wanted to thank you for that fantastic culture that really set me up for my career. And I just want to thank you for that, Harry. Now, that, to me, is what makes a company. If you got a good mission, with good potential, and you can build the culture of integrity and drive, that's it, it'll happen. Now, the stock markets go up and down. We probably had the worst junior mining stock market ever in the last decade. So just surviving was a challenge in a stock market sense. But, all that hard yakka has led to the position that we have now and the platform we have and the opportunities we have. And even Jeff will leave a Robert Friedland and a Gina Reinhardt to come and work for us, you see. So that speaks for itself, how attractive the opportunity is to a professional who's a discoverer. And so I like to think that our performance from now on speak much louder than words, but I can only say that you're welcome aboard. And I look forward to Chancery backing us with better deals in the future. You got too good a deal on the last one, and
you'll have to talk to Jeremy about that.
But it's all very well with hindsight, isn't it? People will tell, you gave him too good a deal. Okay, well, why didn't you put the money in last December? Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. People are quick to talk, but they don't put their money in their hand in their pocket when you need it. So
that's right.
Due credit to you guys. You had the proverbials to make a decision and get on with it, and now of course everyone's our best friend, so there you are, and we'll
of course
next time it'll be a better deal, I can tell you that for nothing. Okay,
I think next time we'll probably be open to that. But I want to thank you for coming on, but I want to thank you again when Max and I were there for hosting us, because you really rolled out the red carpet, and it was such an amazing trip, and it was really incredible, not just to see Addis, but to go to the mine site and to meet the Prime Minister as well, but just to see the potential of what's going to happen there, because we got to see a lot of the people that were there, and obviously, those are going to be a lot of the people that are working, and the Ethiopian people are really amazing. So that was another impressive part about being there. So I want to thank you for that again.
Yeah, I've now got 2 half Ethiopian grandchildren, so they're stuck with me forever now, this country.
It was very good to see you again.
Yeah.
Very good to see you again, and great to hear your news, and glad everything is going according to plan down there. And we look forward to hearing more as it's unraveling and unfolding.
Indeed. All right. And for the viewers, that wraps us up. So until next time, thanks for signing in, and we will see you next week. Cheers, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.